Hey, this is Bing from Wonder Bing Travel, and I've been solo road tripping for a long time. Here on my channel, I talk and teach about every facet of solo road tripping for those who want to use a solo journey as a way to seek freedom and wonder. Personally, taking trips like this by myself, it's changed my life in more ways than I can count. But today, I am admitting to a day of massive failure. A day that went against everything that I teach and preach to people about how to create a road trip that fills your soul and sets you up to experience joy and wonder and freedom as you travel. This video is actually a cautionary tale that shares how I did none of that, but yet still tried so hard for the happy ending. First of all, there's a lot to learn about embarking on a solo road trip, so I have a free guide called Going Solo that will help you get started. Because taking a journey on your own, it's really unlike any other trip you'll ever take. I help you create and design your own unique solo road trip so that it's one of a kind. Grab the free guide below. It's really the best way to begin. Okay, so now back to my mess. So several summers ago, I embarked on what still is my largest road trip to date. It was over a month long. I went through 20 states and covered over 8,000 miles. And after several years of road tripping up to that point, I felt like my framework and my understanding of how I do things was pretty trusty. I was confident and I loved exploring. So about halfway through this big adventure, I arrived in Seattle, and I was going to have 10 days to get from the Seattle area to central Colorado. And for the first time in all of my road tripping planning ever, I had not scheduled one thing in those 10 days. I was in Seattle. In 10 days, I needed to be in South Central Colorado, and the rest was going to be flying by the seat of my pants. So this was an intentional experiment. But let me just tell you that, first of all, flying by the seat of your pants is actually in the Cambridge Dictionary, and the definition is to do something difficult without the necessary skill or experience. Yes, let's note that part. Without the necessary skill or experience. But I guess that's part of the fun of it, or that was what I thought. So the one thing that I wanted to do in this 10-day period was to visit the San Juan Islands, which sit up in the northwestern corner just off the coast of Washington, between Washington and Victoria, British Columbia. But I was my own worst enemy in this whole story. So you know how every story has a hero and every story has like an arch nemesis? I think I might be both in this one. I'm definitely the arch nemesis. I'm my own worst enemy. And let me just tell you that you learn a lot about yourself on a solo road trip that you'd likely not learn another way. And I learned a lot about myself just in this maybe 15-hour period. In fact, I ignored everything I knew about myself as a traveler, and I traded in common sense for reckless spontaneity, and it wasn't a good trade. So I had shiny pebble syndrome that day. A little of this, a little of that. I started off heading north right to the edge of the Canadian border to this small town of Lynden, which had been highly recommended to me by a shopkeeper that I'd met earlier in the week in Leavenworth. And she made it sound great. I'm pretty sure it was her hometown, and she described the kind of small town that I really love visiting. It was near the edge of the mountains, and I was eager to see that, and so off we went. Oh, and when I say we, I mean Lexi the Golden and me. The town was, in fact, lovely. I really enjoyed it, and the drive there was beautiful. Learned that blueberries are king in that part of the country, and the fields are everywhere. It was a time of year where they were in season, and plenty of folks had cute little stands in their front yards, and it was very quaint and charming, and we stopped to check out quite a few of them. The downtown was one of those perfect little towns, one of those ones where it feels like everything there belongs and has stood the test of time, and it all matters to the people. And I mean that in the way that they utilize what is in the town. It's not a show town for tourists. It is their town. I really loved that feeling about it. And Lexi and I, especially as usual, loved the bookstore. And the whole place was just super charming. So that's how it started. Sounds lovely, right? Where's the disaster? Oh, it's coming. I digress. At some point earlier that morning, I had the brilliant idea, and it honestly was a really good idea, and I will hold still now that it was a great idea to contact my high school friend, and I had not seen her except once, since 1984. She had fairly recently moved to Bremerton, which is in the Seattle area, and I thought it would be fun to connect. So we texted a little bit and decided that I would be there for dinner. And Bremerton is about an hour and a half southeast of where I started my day. It seemed like from where I was now, it was a good bit of driving, but I was like, no problem, I can manage this. I looked at the map and I was like, I got this. Shortly after lunch, we headed south out of Lynden and began our drive to Bremerton. At some late moment, I realized that I was really quite far from Bremerton, further than I had realized, and yet I was still determined to take the scenic route and see those islands. I had no idea what I was doing. I don't know how I thought that was even possible at that point. My goal of reaching the islands, let alone exploring them, it went right out the window with the last bit of cold coffee. The San Juans were no longer on the table. I mean, look at the map. If you know maps at all, like, see all that water? It doesn't make any sense. And the only way to get to the islands was on a ferry. So, gosh, what was I thinking? What I was thinking was, how could I be so clueless and so irresponsible? Don't get me wrong, I was really excited to visit my friend, but I think I had said yes or even reached out to her too quickly, because what I did was I compromised the one thing I truly hoped to do in those days that I had. But there was no going back either. I needed to turn south, and then I needed to stay south. The San Juans were going to have to wait for another trip, and I mean, when was that going to be? But now my focus turned to simply getting to my friend Julie's. She'd rearranged her day for me, and here I am, still hours away in the middle of the afternoon. So I made the decision to still drive near the islands and sightsee on the way. And then I'd take the ferry, and I was trying to squeeze every drop of adventure out of the day, and no matter how sideways the whole thing was going. My heart rose and my heart sank with every amazing bit of scenery when it became clear there was no time to pause and investigate. I sped south around Anacortes onto Whidbey Island, whizzing past one of the most iconic, most sought-after views of the trip at Deception Pass. You can see here my photos are embarrassing, and I'm showing them to you because I am embarrassed at what I did not stop to seek and enjoy, which was the wonder of this massively beautiful piece of property. I couldn't even pull over for 2 minutes. I wish I had video of all these gorgeous places. I do not, because I was zooming to get to the next spot, going against all rules of road tripping as far as I'm concerned. This whole thing is a lesson in what not to do when you're road tripping. And in the end, I just bailed. And I prayed for space on the next ferry, and somehow I made it. Again, no video, no lovely photos, because I was so frustrated and hungry that I failed to enjoy most of it. A few miles after the ferry landed back on the mainland and we are pulling back onto the highway, I realized that I am exactly where I started my day. And I am still 3 hours now, because of rush hour, away from where I need to be. Embarrassing, frustrated, starving, no time to stop. I think the only thing that I remember being good was that I did not need to stop and get gas. Ugh. But though it is clear that I attempted to handle this whole day in my own ridiculous ineptitude of strength, God was there with me. He protected me, and he saved me from myself mostly and my foolish ways. He also graced me with 2 amazing moments of wonder. And the thing that's so cool about this is that he gave them to me from the driver's seat, because I literally could not stop for anything. And so he blessed me right where I sat. At one point, the evening rush hour traffic forced me into a very slow crawl going southbound on Route 5, and I continued to grumble about all the hours I still had yet to drive. But then I looked in the rearview mirror, and the glorious Mount Baker filled every inch of the mirror. Okay, there's a little irony here because I was only 30 miles from that mountain earlier in the day when I was in Lynden, and I was trying like crazy to get a good view of it, and there was never a place that I could figure out, and I got frustrated, and that's when we left. But now I'm 100 miles away, right? And many hours, ferry rides, bad decisions, all of that in my rear view, and my rear view mirror provided the perfect framed picture of this glorious mountain. So I press on, and another 30 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, and just a few miles because I'm going slow. I almost rear end the car in front of me as I came around a bend, and my mouth just hung open. My entire windshield, it felt like my entire windshield was filled with Mount Rainier in front of me. I didn't know that was going to happen. I was so surprised. It was so majestic. It was easily 100 miles further south, but it filled the windshield. I felt like I could reach out and touch it. And now I know that on many days, both of those mountains are hidden behind rain and clouds and fog. But on that day, God made sure that I could see them both, one before me and one behind. And it's just such a beautiful reminder that He goes before me and He is behind me, and He's on either side and in and through and all of those things. And wonder prevailed. I failed so many times that day. For starters, I failed to consider time and distance in a place I'd never been. I failed to navigate around a giant city where water is part of the daily adventure. I had no idea. I didn't consider rush hour. I didn't appreciate the massive size of the greater Seattle area. I failed to honor, more importantly, I failed to honor what I know about myself and what works for me. I learned that even though I had plenty of road trip experience, I lacked the necessary skill for diving into the full-blown unknown. I learned in one long and overwhelming day that trying something new doesn't work for me if it's completely haphazard. I personally need some parameters. So if you're a true fly-by-the-seat of your pants girl rambler, that may sound a little bit lame, but ditching everything that works for me ultimately left me indecisive. It left me super stressed, and worst of all, there was no room for wonder, which is really the goal of why I road trip. I tried to embrace the high adventure of the day, but I totally failed. And I failed because it rarely goes well when a notoriously slow processor, that would be me, makes multiple quick decisions, and then they're most often followed by more poor decisions. And I know that my goal each day, this is me. My goal each day is to meet God as I wander in His creation. And I did not allow for room. Instead, I ended up focused on my frustration. I missed all the joy. I wasn't able to stay in the moment. I wasn't able to keep my eyes open and see what He had for me that day. I likely missed a lot of what He had. I know I missed a lot of what He would have had for me that day if I had slowed down, if I had done things differently. But you know what? He was there anyway. He made sure I saw those two mountains, which to me, that may not be very, very meaningful to you, but the majesty of massive snow-capped mountains just does something to me. It is just one of the most amazing sights. I feel it deep down in my bones when I see those. They immediate feelings of wonder immediately often make me cry. So God knew. And the other good news, I did in fact make it to my friend Julie's for dinner, albeit quite late. And dinner, if you call dinner like, I don't know, it was probably 8 or 9 p.m., but that's fine. She and her husband were actually quite charming, and they even offered to have Lexi and I spend the night since it was so late, because of course I had no plan for that either. I had really messed up. But God's grace prevailed where I failed. I learned a lot about flying by the seat of my pants. And maybe the best news, it's one of many experiences that have made me a better adventurer, but also a better planner and a better advisor, a better person to help others who are going through the planning of a road trip and who want to make good decisions and whose goal at their heart is to seek freedom and wonder. I hope this story doesn't discourage you, but actually encourages you to come along for the ride with me and Lexi the Golden. Please download our Going Solo guide, and I will see you in the comments. And oh yes, please subscribe to our channel. We would be so grateful. I hope to see you on the road.